Hey, hi friends, Devi here. Do you think it's crazy to retire at 40 years old? Sipping tea like what I did just now, waking up every morning to your favorite place, doing whatever you want to do, or you can be traveling or any place that you intend to be. No, I'm not selling you a product, but today I'm going to introduce to you a mathematical model which will help you determine how much money you need to save for your retirement and how much you can withdraw each year in order to live off your investment indefinitely without affecting your capital. That's right, today I'm talking about the 4% rule. Before I begin, we'll appreciate your early thumbs up. It will help with the YouTube algorithm, and also do subscribe to help with this channel. Appreciate your support here. So what is the 4% rule? The 4% rule basically say that a retiree should not withdraw more than 4% from their retirement account each year in order to preserve its value. So meaning to say you should not withdraw more than 4% every year, then you are safe, right? And basically this 4% rule is because how was it created is because back in the 90s there was somebody that studies a 50 years period of market returns from 1926 to 1976, and they found that actually it's safe to withdraw 5% of your retirement sum during this period, even though factoring in a few major economic recession like the 1929 ones. Even despite that, you are still safe to withdraw 5% a year. However, as time goes by, they modify it to 4%. Now, this 4% rule actually is assuming that the investor invests 40% bonds and 60% stocks. But however, personally, I'm not a proponent of bonds. Reason being because they give too low a return to actually beat inflation. Now, I can understand back then why they actually allocate some of the sum to bond is because back then for the 50 years period, bond return was between 3 to 8%. It was still relatively okay, but not so good to me, right? But if you look at the past 10 years from 2010 to now, the bond return has decreased from 3.5% to 1%. Essentially, it's not a good investment at all. And even though it seems safe, actually what is safe is not safe. Because as inflation is higher, not only your capital value is not preserved, it will instead eats into your capital sum and depleting it sooner than you initially thought. So this 4% can basically factor in any kind of investment. It can be real estate, stocks, bonds, even cryptocurrency, and so forth. For this purpose, I'm going to illustrate to you how the 4% works. So basically, assuming that you want to retire by 40 years old, and you want to retire with an annual expense of 66,000. This translates to about 5,500 per month, right? So you have an investment sum of 2 million, you withdraw 66,000 every year. Okay, this only accounts to 3.3% of your total sum, so it's still well within the 4% rule. So assuming an inflation of 4%, okay, why 4%? Basically because if you look at this inflation for the past 50 years, it has not go past 5%. In fact, it hovers between 3 to 4%. So on that basis, I put an inflation of 4%. And if you were to assume a return on investment of 7%, okay, at the end of the year, despite withdrawing this sum, you actually still have an additional surplus, right? So 2 million, withdraw 66,000. With the investment growth, you still have this amount. And if you continue to extrapolate this until when you're 80 years old, not only your retirement sum is being preserved, not only that you can safely withdraw this 66,000 per annum, factoring in an inflation of 4.4%, your capital investment sum, your retirement sum, will actually still grow. So that's the beauty of it. Okay, but however, I would say that this 4% rule actually has two main risk factors. Number one is the rate of inflation. Number two is your rate of return of investment. Okay, so I'm just going to show you an example here. So assuming the inflation is still 4%, but however your return on investment is only 4%, basically you're just barely beating inflation. You're just basically breaking even. And you found that under this scenario, by the time you're 69 years old, you are already running out of fund. You already don't have any funds anymore. And this is the worst thing that can happen to you. Or worse, when you are 63 years old, you realize that, oh no, this trend cannot continue, otherwise I'll get depleted. By then, you are 63 years old, it's very hard for you to work. You need to reduce your expenditure, so you have a lesser lifestyle. You have to spend more stingily. So it affects your quality of life in order to sustain the capital. So therefore, with that in mind, I actually have a few pointers how I will personally do it to make sure that this won't happen and to account for all these potential risk, right? Number one is to ensure that my retirement sum is at least 3 million. Okay. Number two, I always allow myself a buffer. What do I mean by that? So say I will always plan my expenditure to be 9,000, but in reality I spend 7,000. That way I plan based on a higher amount, but in reality I spend lesser. That would account for a huge buffer many years down the road. And number three, I always ensure that there's a 2% difference, additional 2% between the inflation and my return of investment. You can see here, even assuming that the inflation is 5%, I have an additional 2% in my return of investment, 7%. That way I won't run out. Okay, you can see that by 80 years old, I still have 1.5 million, which is more than safe. Okay. Rule number four, I always strive to invest aggressively in my early years, meaning to say between 40 to at least 55 years old, if not 60 years old, I would strive for a 20 to 25% return on investment. Why 20 to 25? Because definitely the economy can't keep growing, right? So during the good years, I need to have high rate of return to account for the losses during the bad years. So that even with 20 to 25%, even during the bad years, I can use this surplus to account for these differences. That way I wouldn't run out. So with these four rules, is a lot of level of safety buffer. You definitely won't run out. In fact, your money may even 5 to 6x. So wrapping up, this is the calculation I use to plan to be financially free. A lot of people have the misconception that retiring early or achieving financial freedom early equal to being lazy. But I disagree. Because after all, it takes a lot more effort and discipline to achieve financial freedom early than achieving it late. The goal here is not necessarily not to work, but not to be bound by the necessity of having to work in order to survive. If work requires you to sacrifice your health, your time with loved ones, or stop you from doing what you want to do, then you have the freedom to dictate what you want instead of having to be left with no options but to force yourself to work until you are 60 years old. The corporate world is not necessarily a merciful place, and business dynamics change very fast, so does job security. What seems safe is not necessarily so. I've seen my capable friends at risk of losing their job because of business change. Our time here on earth is limited. Being financially free allows us the freedom to venture into what we want, and we have a safety net to do what we are passionate about without having to fear about financial concerns. And of course, being financially free also allows us the freedom to contribute back to the society. Not that you shouldn't contribute back to society if you're not financially free, but I think you get what I mean. So I hope you learned something today and you find value in this content. And as usual, invest safe.